G'day everyone and welcome to my art channel Brushes with Beck. Today's video is at last the final stage of this kangaroo drawing that I've been working on for quite some time. If you are new to my channel or you haven't seen any of those previous videos, I'm going to link the first one up in the cards above and along with all of them in the description box down below so you can check those out. This has been a work in progress since about October last year. So it's very good to finally have it done and have completed this. It's been a real labour of love and work in progress for a very long time. So this piece is a red kangaroo on a piece of dark grey pastel matte board. And the pencils I've used for this piece, mostly Faber-Castell Polychromos, but I'm also using some Derwent drawing pencils as well. So it's very much So it's been a very slow piece to work on, very slow progress. I don't always make a lot of time to work on my art during the week. So it's taken me multiple sessions over, the weeks and months to get it to this point. So what you see me working on here is the bridge of the kangaroo's nose and just above the nose itself. In that area, I've laid down some base colours and then blended those out with a cotton bud just to soften up that pencil and to smooth it out to remove some of the texture from the pastel matte. And then I'm going in with my pencils again and laying in the fur detail over the top of that underlayer, that beautiful smooth color. So that covers the paper color itself, and you can get the undertone for your fur strands and then just lay in the texture over the top without having to worry about, rather than having to lay down all of those fur strands and all of the colors, you can lay down those base layers first and have it do half the work for you. So it's a very slow process, especially in areas like this on the nose where the fur strands are so tiny, they're just tiny little dashes of color. So it takes a very long time to work through that. Moving on to the nose, I've used that beautiful Mars Violet colour from the Derwent drawing range. It's fantastic colour. Absolutely love it for both highlights and shadows. It adds just a beautiful tone to specific areas of a piece. And the nose is interesting because it's a smooth surface, but it has texture. So I've gone in and I've put in my colours of the nose, but then once I've gone in with my darker colours over the top, I've left some of that texture there from the pastel matte to represent the pattern texture of the leathery nose itself. So it's useful in this instance to be able to use the pastel matte texture to the advantage of the piece itself, rather than trying to cover up that texture like is often done in eyes and fur. So the muzzle was probably the most complicated part of this section of video, not the entire piece, but just this part. And just because there were a lot of different changes in color and shadow, they've got dark fur strands, shadow underneath, the bright whites, the dark fur patches, and it was just, it's not hard, it's just time consuming because you have to check everything that you're doing, make sure you're using the right color, make sure you've got the right base layer down, and then working in those fur strands over the top. Lots of little ones again, along with some longer whiskers. Now you can see me here in this dark area. I'm going down with a light blue and that Mars Violet first, because there are some blue and purple tones in this area from the way the light is hitting that black and dark brown fur. So little things like that can really add a lot of depth to your piece, so be mindful of that. If you think you see blue in a dark area, you probably do. Make sure you use some blue in that area. So that's really important, to make sure you're looking at all the colours that are in your piece to be able to make it look as realistic as possible. If you're just using brown, it's not going to come out quite the same. So as you can see, there's a lot of different fiddly bits in this muzzle here, and that's why it was so complicated and it took me a really long period of time. So it was just making sure I was working around different areas, mapping out the color changes, making sure everything was in the right place, that I didn't miss anything, and making sure that those first strands were all going in the correct direction, just a lot of things to keep in mind when you're working in a really detailed area like that with a lot of changes. To keep in mind that not only color, but value, the underlayers, your fur color, shadows, and your fur direction as well. So everything that you need to plan ahead for while you are working through your piece. Now, if you are curious about the Pastelmat board that I'm using as the surface for this piece, I do have a few videos where I've drawn pieces on Pastelmat. I'll link up in the cards above the very first piece I did on Pastelmat, and there's also a couple of other videos. There's another series of videos where I drew a duck on Pastelmat and used only the pencils for blending and not a cotton bud for those underlayers, so that might be interesting as well. And a few different pieces here and there throughout time, and also a comparison of the Faber-Castell Polychromos color pencils and the Derwent drawing pencils on Pastelmat, where I did a side-by-side of the same image. I'll link that up in the cards above as well, so you can check that out if you are interested. So blending on Pastelmat can be done in many, many ways. It's very common to use solvents. I haven't used solvents on Pastelmat before, but I like to blend out either with the pencils themselves, or I will use a cotton bud to do some blending, usually for the underlayers or to soften an area up if I need to. But it really depends on the piece itself. The cotton bud I use more in large areas where I'm trying to cover large areas of color at once, like what I did with the body of the kangaroo, but not so much with the smaller areas, which are just as easy to blend out with your pencils themselves. So it does take a little bit of getting used to blend out, but like with any surface, once you get used to it, it's an absolute dream to use. So just working in some of that fine detail on the muzzle there, some of those whiskers, they're absolutely lovely, those whiskers, and Pastelmat makes it so easy to lay them down because it grips the color very easily. And moving back up towards the top of the head here, I haven't done this right hand side of the forehead here. Now I can't start at the bottom because the stuff at the bottom overlaps the stuff at the top. So I have to work from the top down in this section to make sure my fur overlaps in the correct way, especially once I get down to that other eye. There are sections of that eye and the eyelid that need to be behind strands of fur. So we need to make sure that we're working through the piece in an order that's going to represent the animal correctly, because I don't want to do sort of the front of that bridge of that nose and then do the eyelid behind it and have the eyelid overlapping the fur strands from the bridge of the nose, because that's not going to look accurate. And it's going to ruin the perception of depth of your image. So just something to keep in mind as you're working on something like this. So just adding in the little detail for the eye there. There's not as much to do in this eye as there was in the other one. It's much more basic. There's not a lot to see, and there's not a lot of variance in color there, that I don't have to worry about the reflections so much in that one, which makes it a lot easier as well. Just making sure the shape is correct and I've got my highlight in the right spot mostly. So back to detailing this nose and this area here, making sure I get everything in behind before I put in the fur strands over the top that are in front of it. And on this side of the face also, there's some quite prominent cheek whiskers, I suppose. There's not as many visible on the main side of the face that you can see, but from that angle where the face is turned for the eye that's on the far side, those whiskers are very prominent, and you'll see me pop those in a little bit. Just finishing up some details that I missed earlier and adding in some slightly different colors just to change up the tone a little bit. So going back in, I left all these little details until last: the eyelashes, the eye whiskers, fine little hairs that go over the top of everywhere else, because I wanted to finish up the piece overall, and then go back in and do those fine hairs that stick out from the edge of the kangaroo, because they were the most likely to get smudged accidentally if I was moving my hand around a lot or accidentally resting it on the paper. So all those whiskers and bits and pieces I did leave until later on, just to make sure that I wasn't ruining any of them, I suppose. just refining that eye a little bit before I do the eyelashes there. And just make sure as well that you are... I didn't follow my whiskers exactly, but I followed them pretty closely, added them in different angles, leading out in different angles, slightly different curves and slightly different colours, just to make it a little bit more realistic. Now, back in this far left corner of the piece, I never actually finished up. This is a segment of the hind leg that's crept into the corner of the image. I didn't finish that up when I first started the piece. I wanted to come back to it, and that's just me finishing that up there. It doesn't need to be very crisp and detailed because the main focus of this piece is the kangaroo's face, as you can see here. So there is a lot of more detail and richness and vibrancy in the face because that's the main focus, and you can see all these beautiful whiskers here in this close-up shot of the kangaroo's face. So I know it's been a long time coming for me to finish up this kangaroo piece, but it's finally done and I'm absolutely thrilled with the result. I really hope you guys like it too. If you did, please comment down below, like my video, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you around again next week for another video. Stay creative.